Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Karen. I make bookish and college related videos, and as I mentioned in last week's video, I am pre-filming videos today, so that is why there are 3 videos of me wearing this exact outfit. Also, I realized that I wore this every single time I filmed while I was at home, and I have other clothes. Anyway, in this video, I will be sharing 6 different books that were released in 2020 and that I wished I read in 2020. Because I recognize that I really only read YA or nonfiction, I chose 3 books from both of those genres, and these are books that I definitely would have read if I wasn't lazy. And of course, there's never a timeline on when you should absolutely read books by, except for class. Class books definitely have a due date. So I can definitely see myself reading all of these books in the near future. But again, the time has passed for 2020. So I'm going to get started with the non-fiction books first. The first book is Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. This was published on, I should scoot over. This was published on August 4th, 2020, and I'm just gonna read like a paragraph of the synopsis for each of these books that come straight from Amazon or Goodreads. The synopsis reads, "In this brilliant book, Isabel Wilkerson gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon in America as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched narrative and stories about real people, how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings." Why do I wish that I read this book in 2020, you ask? As a history major, I love to dive deep into the origins of different ideas and events, as well as the main causes and effects of those events. I think reading this book in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic and on top of all of the civil rights movements that we are still experiencing till to this day probably would have enhanced my entire understanding of the caste system and really put real life examples in my face as I was reading the book. The second book is Yellow Bird by Sierra Crane Murdoch. This was published at the very beginning of 2020 on February 25th. The synopsis read, "When Lisa Yellowbird was released from prison in 2009, she found her home, the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota, transformed by the Bakken oil boom. In her absence, the landscape had been altered beyond her recognition, her tribal government swayed by corporate interests, and her community burdened by a surge in violence and addiction. 3 years later, when Lisa learned that a young white oil worker, Christopher Casey Clark, had disappeared from his reservation work site, she became particularly concerned. No one knew where Clark had gone, and a few people were actively looking for him." So I've never read investigative journalism before in books. It's always just been investigative journalism in terms of documentaries and television. So this book was 8 years in the making, in which Lisa had to navigate these 2 worlds of her native tribe and non-native oil workers. This dynamic seems very interesting to read about, and it seems like the plotline of some sort of literary fiction novel. I might read this in 2021 actually, because I do have that reading goal of reading books by Indigenous authors. I think I'm going to expand that to include books about Indigenous history in general. The last nonfiction book that I wish I read in 2020 was The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. Published on March 24th, the synopsis read, "Writer Carla was on DACA when she decided to write about being undocumented for the first time using her own name. It was right after the election 2016, the day she realized the story she tried to steer clear of was the only one she wanted to tell. So she wrote her immigration lawyer's phone number on her hand in Sharpie and embarked on a trip across the country to tell stories of her fellow undocumented immigrants and to find the hidden key to her own." Why do I wish I read this back in 2020? Well, I have personal connections with people who are on DACA or undocumented, and so this is always a topic that I want to expand my own knowledge on and to learn all the different ways in which I can help. This book comes at the near end of this current presidency, and I think that's kind of perfect timing for the book. I think I would have had an amazing experience reading this book this year on top of everything that's been going on. And this book was also a finalist for the National Book Award for Nonfiction, so you know that this book was really good. And I saw a lot of people on Bookstagram really promoting this book and really talking highly of it. So those are the 3 nonfiction books that I wish I grabbed onto this year, or this past year. God. Now I'm going to move on to YA books that I wish I read in 2020. So the first one is The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So this was published May 19th, and okay, the synopsis. It is the morning of the reaping that will kick off the 10th annual Hunger Games. In the capital, 18-year-old Cornelius Snow is preparing for his one shot at glory as a mentor in the games. The once mighty House of Snow has fallen on hard times, its fate hanging on the slender chance that Cornelius will be able to outcharm, outwit, and outmaneuver his fellow students to mentor the winning tribute. So I have a secret to share. I was actually sent this book over the summer. I was sent this book to help with a promotional video. I'll share it on the screen here, but basically we were just asked to read the first couple of pages to whoever reached out to me. I think it was some sort of like promotional social media team. So because I was sent this book, and this is the first ever book that I was ever sent because of my booktube or the book TikToks that I created a long time ago. So because of this, I wish I read it in 2020. But if I'm being honest, I haven't read the last 2 books of the Hunger Games trilogy. Eventually, I feel like I will read this book because like it's sitting very prettily on my shelf and it was sent to me and I'm so grateful. But I did not read past the second page that I was supposed to. The second YA book I wish I read in 2020 is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, published on May 5th. In a dual narrative novel in verse that brims with both grief and love, award-winning and best-selling author Elizabeth Acevedo writes about the devastation of loss, the difficulty of forgiveness, and the bittersweet bond that shapes their lives. So I feel like this is one of those books that everyone read or everyone raved about at some point after its release, but I didn't really see a lot on this book, if I'm being honest. I love like dual narrative novels. Also, 2 perspectives means there's just 2 perspectives. You don't have to worry about so many characters. I can't deal with books with a lot of characters in them, if I'm being honest. I know that this book also touches on topics of race, sexual assault, grief, and family, and so I know that this would be the type of book that I wish I read when I was a teenager. Last YA book that I wish I read in 2020 is More Than Maybe by Erin Hahn, published on July 21st. Growing up under his punk rocker's dad's spotlight, 18-year-old Luke Greenlee knows fame and wants nothing to do with it. His real love isn't in front of a crowd, it's on the page. Hiding his gift and secretly hoarding songs in his bedroom at night, he prefers the anonymous comfort of a locally popular podcast he co-hosts with his outgoing, meddling, far too jealously, inspiringly happy with his long-term boyfriend twin brother Colin. That's not Luke's only secret. He also has a major unrequited crush on a music vlogger, Veda Carswell. Why do I wish I read this in 2020? Well, if I'm being honest, I don't think I've ever read any sort of YA contemporary romance book from the perspective of a boy. Automatically seems like one of those like cute, mushy gushy, the humidifier turned on. Automatically seems like one of those really mushy gushy, cutesy book that I always crave during the summertime. And so that is why I wish I read it back in 2020 after it was published. Anyway, please let me know in the comments what books you wish you read in 2020 and were released in 2020. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and please subscribe. That'll make me very happy. I have new videos coming your way very soon. Bye everyone.